that Whispers from Eternity reading seems particularly appropriate after having just come back from India, where prayer in the tumult seems to be kind of the order of the day. And several of the places we went, we were challenged, shall we say, in that regard. But it was a good challenge. I wanted to begin with a song today that captures a little bit of the experience of pilgrimage, not just the 3-week variety, but also the 70, 80, 100-year variety that we're all engaged in. I've roamed the far hills and learned many skills. I've wandered on many a shore. Though often I've thought I'd gained what I sought, a voice always said, there's more. Go sing with the sun and dance with the moon. Go ride on the highest star. The reaches of space lack one special place. It's there that my heart did soar. I've roamed the far hills and learned many skills. I've wandered on many a shore. Though often I've thought I'd gained what I sought, a voice always said, there's more. Go sing with the sun and dance with the moon. Go ride on the highest star. The reaches of space lack one special place. It's there that my heart did soar. That's actually the introduction to a song that continues on that Swami Kriyananda wrote, but I felt to pause there because the topic today, touching as it does on prayer, has this very inward component to it, and that inward aspect is something that we can't necessarily articulate in words. It can't be formalized. It can't be sort of made one size fits all. It ends in a question. And that's sort of one of these uncomfortable realities for us, because we're taught basically from birth that every question is supposed to have an answer, which it does ultimately, but we have to be willing to allow our lives to be a question. What is the purpose of our life? Why are we here? Why are we walking around this planet? And sort of what end does that come to? And that's where prayer begins. That's where real prayer begins. Nirmala last week was recounting an interaction between Jyotish and Swamiji, in which Jyotish was asking him if we should use a particular prayer. My memory of the way that story went is that he was asking Swami, after you're gone, should we unify our broad, sprawling Ananda work around the world by offering a certain prayer every day, sort of a uniting prayer? And Swamiji's response was very simple. He did pause and think about it for a while, but he said, well, it's been many years since I prayed with words. And he wasn't being flippant. He was just stating the fact that for him, prayer was something much deeper than a formula. It was much deeper than a ritual or something outward. It was a very intimate connection. And so for us, as we relate to this topic, we have to realize that inwardness is something that we're not necessarily all comfortable with or adjusted to. We, several of us, 10 or 12 or 15 of us here, I don't know, I can't count in the room, but just came back from a pilgrimage in India last weekend, and we had a satsang and we spoke a little bit about it. But I wanted to address it a little bit more today, not so much in terms of the outward, first we went here and there then we went there, and this place was special, although I also wanted to add my testimony to Terry's that who spoke last week about one particular place. We went to a temple that Nirmala and I had never been to in Calcutta called Dakshineshwar, and that temple is a place that Yogananda had a very powerful experience. But it's a place that Ramakrishna, the master Ramakrishna, lived for many years. And he had a room there, being a official temple functionary there. He had a little room as part of the temple complex where he stayed. And, you know, you go to a temple to be in the vibration of a particular energy there, and that energy was amazing. It's a Divine Mother temple, Kali temple, and it's powerful. It's all, I mean, what else can I say? It just simply is. But going to Ramakrishna's room and meditating there, which people were sort of filing in and out, I mean, it's really just the reading from Whispers pretty much captures it. Well, there's a lot of commotion. You know, India is not noted for being a quiet place unless you're off in the Himalayas in a cave or something. I mean, you're dealing with 1.2 billion people. And a lot of them feel like they're in the room with you while you're, you know, or out on the street or honking their horn or doing whatever they're doing. Life is happening around you to an amazing degree. But going into that bedroom and sitting quietly off to the side while all this commotion was happening, it's like there was this presence that just said, I love you and I support you and I'm here for you and keep going. You're doing good. It's like, and it was just this, you know, kind of hit you right in the heart kind of experience in a very loving, warm way, you know, not hit you in the heart and hurt you and knock you over, but just sort of support you. And it was completely unexpected. You know, I mean, we, again, had never been there, didn't really know what to expect. You go to a shrine, you feel what's there. That's part of the exercise of pilgrimage, is to be willing to open ourselves to whatever may come. And that's a challenging exercise to follow because we don't know. There's amazingly different energies in India. I don't know how to describe that more specifically, but we are accustomed to seeing a spectrum of humanity that's relatively narrow in the West. And when you go to India, one of the stunning and even perhaps shocking things is that the spectrum of humanity is just way, way wider. And that means on both ends of the spectrum. There's just a lot more at the low end that we don't really want to look at, and there's a bunch at the high end that we've just simply never seen before and never had conscious encounter with before. And those are saints and masters. I was reflecting this week that we don't, I mean, apart from the fact that here in America, the culture itself is only a handful of centuries, a small handful of centuries old, and in some of these other places it goes back many millennia. Apart from that, we don't specialize. Even if we go back to Europe, where civilization goes back thousands of years, if we think of where do you find saints? Some of us went on a trip through Italy some years ago and visited shrines of saints, and virtually every little town and village in Italy has. I mean, it's almost like you can't hold your head up as an Italian city if there isn't an incorrupt saint somewhere in your church, you know, some basilica or something. I mean, it's just like you don't count. You know, you have to You'll go steal somebody else's incorrupt saint and put them in your church if you have to, but it's like a medieval capture the flag kind of game, capture the saints' remains and bring them there so that you have them to show and offer. But even if we look at that, we think, okay, we have 2,000 years of Christianity, which means 2,000 years of saints, but there aren't really. I mean, if you look back, the vast majority of them are just in the last few hundred years, and okay, a sprinkling of them across the centuries before that, leading back to Christ. And so we just don't have that many. Whereas in India, we have a tradition of masters and saints that goes back, we don't even know how many thousands of years. I mean, it comes a certain point and, it's like the structure that they lived in or the place that they lived in, it becomes legend because it's all fallen down by this point. But the stories are there and the tradition has been unbroken for those thousands of years. And so there's this collected power in it. And wow, it's just takes your breath away sometimes. And we were moved by that, touched by that, challenged by that. This affirmation reading on acceptance contains a line about, I won't read it again, but I'll just paraphrase it. Something about we have to be willing to receive God completely into our own hearts. And in the other reading, the Ray's reading, it was talking about we have to clarify our own feelings. And it occurred to me, there's a song that we sing as part of the festival, You Remain Our Friend. And in that song, long we feared to face your love, lest our emptiness it prove. And if you think about those words, it's a little confusing. Why would facing God's love prove our emptiness? Well, it struck me that emptiness it's like to face God's love means to face the ultimate sort of awareness of who we actually are. To receive God completely into our hearts is, I don't want to cast this too strongly because it may be uncomfortable, but it's a demanding experience. It demands that we acknowledge who we actually are, and that's challenging. We sort of want to hide some of it. We want to hide a little bit of it because, it's like protection. It's like the clothing that we wear. I don't know if you ever had a dream. I remember having these once in a while as a child where I got all the way to school in the dream without my pants on. And it's a very uncomfortable feeling, It's sort of like, oh God, everybody's laughing and it's how could I forget my pants, So basic thing. But on an inward level, that's like what we feel. We're going to let God in, but I don't know if I'm going to let God in. And that's one of the things that going to India helped us to recognize is we have a culture there that is God-centered. Now, it happens to also be an extremely materialistic culture. I mean, contradictions is just like the central theme of India. So, you have to recognize that contradictions are just part of the equation, and you have to be willing and able to hold that all in your head at the same time and not freak out. But there is this God-centric element to the culture, and it's not just formalized religion. In fact, I was reflecting back to many, many encounters over the years where people would see a group of us together, especially once some of us started dressing in blue, and they would naturally sort of wonder, who are you? What do you do? Who do you follow? Whatever. We would say we're disciples of Yogananda. And there would be this universal response. It was like, oh, that's wonderful. It would be just as if you said to them, we just had our first baby yesterday, or, I just got married, or my son just got married, or my brother or my wife, well, yes, my wife just got married. No, not quite that. I and my wife just got married. Anyway. But, there would be this palpable sense of, oh, that's so wonderful that you have a guru. You don't necessarily get that at the car wash here. It's just not the natural automatic response. First of all, the topic would never come up, and if it did, it would be like, whoa, okay. Different times on an airplane, someone would ask, the conversation would come up, where are you coming from, where are you going, what are you doing? And some of us had some very interesting conversations on the flights in India or to and from India. It's very fascinating. But, I would, if the question came to me very directly, I would just say, well, I teach meditation and yoga and work with a community of people who do that also. And we live together and share that lifestyle. And I can't tell you how many times, it hasn't happened a lot of times in this country, but virtually every time that it has happened, it's been like, okay, let's change the subject. What do you say we talk about sports or the weather or something else that's a little more safe territory, perhaps? But in India, there is this sense that there's a natural trajectory to life. Last summer, we did a day of living yoga in July, and Nishala Cryer released a book at that time and came to do a book signing called what is the title of that book? Anybody in the boutique room? The 4 Stages of Yoga. There we go. Okay. It's a lovely book. And it talks about these natural stages of life. We're a student. We have to learn. We have to go through the steps. How do you function in this world? What's trying to happen in life? And so forth. Then the next step is a householder, which doesn't automatically mean marriage and kids, but generally that's the expected path. It also means taking some role in society. Often that's a job, but not necessarily. So there's this sense of first you kind of get yourself together, then you figure out how you're going to fit into the broader culture, and then you take the next step. And the next step is to look for the spiritual in life. How am I going to embrace the spirituality that is my own? It's not something that somebody forced upon me or twisted my arm or persuaded me, but what is my very own? And that's what people would respond to when we said we have a guru. They would be like, oh, how wonderful for you. And there wouldn't be this automatic next thought, oh, well, so bummer for me that I don't have a guru. It would be like, I want to. Someday, maybe that'll come to me too. There would be this very hopeful sense, yes, maybe one day I too will know that sense of oneness or connectedness. And then, and so there's a third stage, which is called grihasta, which is kind of now you've done your job for society. You've kind of, your kids are settled, you've done that. And now, what's the spiritual side? And then the last stage is called sannyas, and that's the stage where you just say, God, it's all yours. And I'm heading for the forest, or I'm heading for the mountains, or I'm, the traditional thing is you renounce everything and walk away. And in this modern day, that's tempered a little bit by the fact that first of all, if you try to put 1 billion people in caves, you're going to have a tremendous sanitation problem, which is bad enough already, but that's not the message of the hour. The message of the hour is to find your sannyas within, to find your path within, and to learn to live it in a dynamic and beautiful way. And that opportunity is everyone's. How and where and when it comes is up for grabs. We have to decide. The very first lines in the autobiography of a yogi, the characteristic features of Indian culture have long been a search for ultimate verities and the concomitant disciple-guru relationship. I love how he puts these words in there, concomitant. You know, you have to sort of go back to your school days to remember, what does concomitant mean? The natural segue of it means you're going to have a disciple-guru relationship. If you're searching for ultimate verities, sooner or later you're going to have disciples and you're going to have gurus. Well, the disciple part of that comes first, because the disciple is the one who turns the valve on or off. The flow through the faucet is entirely determined by the disciple. Disciple wants to be a disciple, then there's going to be a guru. Disciple doesn't want to be a disciple, no guru, no relationship. And the relationship, even once formed, is dependent on the disciple. Because there's never any force applied. The force ought to always, and by definition, has to come from ourselves. And so, Swamiji saying, it's been long years since I've prayed with words, means that there's a yearning, there's a calling, but it's not articulated in some formal sort of way. It's far too intimate for that. I'm reminded that experience that we had at the Ramakrishna room, and others had in other places as well, reminded me of an experience that Swamiji had in Italy. He was in the Porziuncola and he was praying there and meditating, and he felt St. Francis. He felt the presence and the tangible living vibration of Francis, and the sweetness of it overwhelmed him. And he prayed and he said, how is this possible? I have never even conceived of such sweetness. And the answer that he felt was by never judging, by recognizing that everyone is a child of God, but above all, by never judging. And he just simply received that. And that intimacy, that closeness is something that our culture doesn't give us. You know, looking at the painting on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, you see God about to touch Adam and the spark of life is about to come. But, you know, that ceiling is way the heck up in the air. I mean, it's not, I mean, they call it a chapel. I mean, this looks like a chapel compared to that. And, I mean, it's a big, high place. And God is always far away. In the theology, in the mindset, God is always somewhere else. In fact, there's a branch of Christian theology that describes God as wholly other, completely outside of creation, which is part of the Indian tradition as well. It's just that God also is creation, both outside and inside. Anyway, but that wholly other thing creeps into our culture, and we get this feeling that, well, God is just far away. You know, he's busy somewhere else. He's listening to somebody else's prayer. You know, he's watching football. I don't know what he's doing, but he's, you know, there's just something else happening, and I'm not part of it. And so we have to break that mindset. Going to India did that to a degree, I think, for all of us. But we don't have to go to India to have that happen. We just have to plow the soil ourselves and be willing to sort of go through the effort and deconstruct, clarify our own feelings. And so I'll go back to where I started by saying, what is, if we ask ourselves in the silence of our own meditation, the stillness of the night when we wake up, what is my actual purpose? What am I here for? What am I looking for in my life? What is the most meaningful thing that would mean fulfillment? That song that I sang, I've roamed the far hills and learned many skills. I've wandered on many a shore. Though often I thought I'd gained what I sought, a voice always said, there's more. That voice is the voice of God inside of us, but that voice doesn't scream at us, it whispers. And so if there's too much commotion going on inside, we don't hear it. And we don't hear that voice saying, you know, keep going. You're doing good, but keep going. There's more. And that calling has to then come from our hearts, because we all of us want divine love. But we don't necessarily realize is that there isn't an open channel for us to fully receive it until we ourselves are loving. We have to actually do the loving. That's why there's that interesting line about in the Ray's reading about God doesn't want anything from us except our love to complete His love for us. Try unpacking that one this week. There's a little bit of a challenge in that, but just stick with that one for a while. Our love completes His love for us, which is to say, allows us to receive it more and more and finally completely. So we have that challenge in front of us, but how do we love? Well, you look around from side to side, you go through life, family, situations. All of us have opportunities to share and help someone else in our life. That's how we love. That's how we serve. I offered the prayer, what should I pray in India? And the response that I felt was, let me love Divine Mother first and completely, as much as I can, and let me serve Divine Mother in everyone. It's not a complicated prayer, but let me do those two things. Let me love as much as I can, and let me serve as much as I can. And that's the DNA of Ananda. I was reflecting, we had a satsang in Mumbai, and there's a new center there, which is a little bit like saying a new center in downtown Manhattan somewhere. I mean, it's not that it looks exactly like Manhattan, but it's every bit as compressed and dense as Manhattan, and the real estate is similarly priced. Anyway, we had a lovely satsang there, and people were reminding us that we had come to teach there, and that's how the energy really got started. And I reminded them, because I don't think many of them even knew, that Haridas had come with me, and Haridas helped to form the Sacramento Center back in 1977, along with Nayaswami Vijay. Haridas was amazing on that trip. And I knew him, but I hadn't ever traveled with him, stayed in the same hotel room with him. And so I told people there in the room, he had 3 speeds that I could tell, 3 basic modes. Mode number 1 was in the nighttime he would sleep a few hours. Not overly many, and there frankly weren't overly many to be even had, even if he had wanted to. 6 hours, something like that. Okay, so he slept. The other 2 modes, he was either meditating, which he did long hours, even in very busy scheduled days, or he was helping, serving. There was virtually 0 time fuddling in front of the mirror, or worrying about which clothes to wear, or all the little stuff. So much time we fuss over our little selves. And yeah, okay, a little bit of that is needed, but we don't have to make a life of it. There was no fuss mode for Haridas. And that's the DNA of Ananda Mumbai, and that's the DNA of Ananda in general. And we need to try to help and serve in every way that we can possibly do. Then we actually feel this lovely grace, flow of grace coming into and through us. And that's what we're seeking, and that's what we're striving for. Let us offer our love to Divine Mother in the language of our hearts, silently, inwardly. Take a moment just now, close your eyes, and just feel that grace. Feel that blessing. Openness coming from our hearts to receive love coming from the divine. And then when that love is ready to flow out through us, it will find a natural and beautiful channel to do so. Om. peace. Amen. So before we have our